Hello, and welcome to the instructional video for Can You Survive the Great War? So in this game, students will play as individual soldiers, and you could put them in groups so they can share dice and decks of cards, but there's no actual small group mechanic. There are some large group mechanics, but everything else is small group. And the cards are fairly simple. It just has the name and the job of the person. The job has no mechanical connection to the game. It doesn't give you any bonuses or anything like that. It's just meant to give this soldier some personality. You can see there's also health boxes, and I recommend using plastic sleeves and having people use markers to mark off the health. But if you want to just print these out on a just black and white sheet of paper, they can also just mark off their health that way. But you'll want multiple cards because people will die. That's part of the point of the game, is that most students should die at least once to show how brutal the war was. One thing also in this game, you represent not simply European France, but the French Empire. So it includes soldiers from like North Africa and West Africa as well. So, but like I said, each person gets a card to begin with, and then you can put them in groups, but there's no mechanic for them being in groups. It's just so they can share dice and cards. So it's good to have each person needs a dice, just a single dice, and it's good to have a shared place for them to be able to roll the dice in. And typically what's going to happen is they're going to go through different experiences of what it was like to be a soldier. So for example, they start off with the difficulties of living in a trench, and they're asked to make a luck check. And all checks are the same. I just gave them different names just to show, whether it's something connected to whether you just get lucky or not, or skillful or not. Sometimes soldiers survive by luck, sometimes they survive by skill. But here you're making a luck check, and if you and then we give a range of numbers, and that tells what happens. So here, if you roll 3, 4, 5, or 6, nothing happens. But if you roll a 1 or a 2, you develop trench foot, and there's a trench foot card you can give people, and that's why there's this picture to show, you spend all day in the water, there's a good chance you'll get sick. And if there's a penalty, right? You develop trench foot and suffer -1 to future dice rolls. So you get a 5 here, that would be reduced to a 4. Now, if the soldier dies, they lose this condition. But this is something that's kind of fun to give out the cards, and students can see how bad it was. And there's a lot of events like this where it's very simple. You just read out what happens, and you help students if they have trouble understanding it. But basically, we simulate a German attack on the French, and then you get a chance to rest. And when they rest, this is the one place where they have a choice. If they have trench foot, they can choose to cure it. They can regain a health, or they can have further training, which would allow them to gain +1 bonus. So if they rolled a 5, they would raise that to a 6. So that's how that works. And that's a place where they get a choice. And they get into that. They enjoy having that choice and upgrading their soldier. And then then it switched over. Then they go on the attack, right? So they're going to go on the attack, and then they roll a dice. And if they didn't cure their trench foot, they subtract 1. If they have 3 or more, nothing happens. You continue running. But if they draw a roll 1 or 2, they draw a card, right? So at this point, you would give them this deck of cards, and not everyone gets a deck. This is where it just helps to have groups. So if you have 5 decks of cards, you put students in 5 different groups, and then they have to follow the instructions. And if they die, you just immediately give them a new character, because the idea, first of all, you just don't want people to be sitting out. It's kind of boring. But also, again, we want people to see just how so much World War I was just throwing a mass of men at the problem. But the cards say things like this. So on the left, you're struck by multiple pieces of shrapnel and suffer a major injury. Fill in 2 health boxes. So if we go back, right, you've got the character cards with the health boxes. So you would mark 2 off, and if you mark all of them off, you die. So that's the idea there. But there's also instant death cards, right? An artillery shell explodes nearby, blowing you to bits. Inform the instructor of your demise. And so you do this until the end of the game, and then I ask people, okay, did you die in the last attack, right? And if they do, I give them this card. You've fallen in battle. France will never forget your sacrifice. If they survived with no wounds or 1 wound, I give them this card. You have survived the war and returned safely to your family and friends. Now the task of rebuilding begins. And you can let them keep these cards, or you can get them back afterwards. I like to let them keep them, but a lot of people just will give them back anyway. But what's especially important, I think, is that you then ask, okay, who had 2 wounds, right? All soldiers require, they die if they get 3 wounds. 1 wound is like minor. 2 wounds, I like to think of as something major. And so if they ended the game with 2 wounds, I give them one of these cards. So on the left, you can see that's a man who has lost an arm, a soldier, an African soldier who lost an arm and is learning how to write with only 1 arm. The other 2, you have to decide whether it's appropriate for your classroom. They both do the same one. The middle one are masks that are meant for men whose faces have been wounded, and some of those are also masks that record the wounds. On the right, you can see the kind of person who would get a mask, and those are all very traumatic facial injuries. And so soldiers could survive those terrible industries. Medicine was advanced enough that they could survive them, but they would face very difficult lives afterwards. And so that's why they would make these masks that they could wear, and they could at least go outside without people staring at least too much. So that's why you've survived the war, but you will carry the pain of your wounds for the rest of your life. And so once it's up to you whether you include those cards. The amputee cards aren't too bad, but I think it's important to give students a sense of what the soldiers went through. And then we just ask at the end, how did things go for you? What does that tell us about the Great War? And it's a simple lesson. It's just that, being in the Great War was not fun, and it was really easy to die.